Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? We've been off for a few weeks, but we're back in the middle of winter and ready to roll, aren't we?
Yeah, I must say it's nice to be outdoors, but it is a bit chilly today.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice backdrop, by the way, if I didn't comment already, but it's all good. So we're going to I guess, broadly wax philosophical for the next little while, just rather than focus on a very specific topic. But I guess if we had to describe what we're about to talk about in terms of the general public discourse, the presentation of ideas in the current world environment, media, social media, news, and whatever else. There's about 1 billion platforms to publish to these days, it would seem, and everyone has the ability to, essentially broadcast what they think and what they do 24/7 if they want to anyone that wants to watch it. And this is like a fundamental thing that's could be argued is changing society, really, and our behaviours, because, and it's only been in the last, 10 years? I mean, it might even be less than that if you consider that, sort of mainstream sort of capturing of, what you want to put out there. I mean, it's been around, but I know for us, I don't think we really started doing like this doing the podcast using these devices until at least 2011 or 2012, we have some background in producing video, so someone that has no background probably might have been a couple of years later when it became a bit easier. But I just on that point to start with, it seems to me that there's something fundamentally changing here, and I know we've discussed, like, none of this came with a rule book or a set of guidelines, so we potentially might be in some interesting territory from a social point of view, I guess.
Yeah, look, it's all new, isn't it? Like you say, we've been doing our podcast for 5 or 6 years now, and we constantly remark about how the technology's changed. But I think the rise of the podcaster and the real opinion piece and the sort of philosophical opinion piece as well that's now starting to sprout is certainly something new again. And it's happening now, I think, outside of the traditional social media platform, which is Facebook and probably Twitter. It's now an extension of that. And I think it's a really interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start, I guess, in one particular area, which is, I guess, the rise of the what would you call it? The YouTube intellectuals, I guess. And that might sound like it's a bit condescending, but essentially what it means is when you get, someone who actually would be considered an intellectual because they're dealing with ideas. They're not talking in sound bites. They're trying to get across a point of view, a set of ideas to try and make you think about things. The type that you would probably see, like a university professor. You go to a lecture and you get presented with ideas, but they're now starting to record them and put them up on YouTube, and they're getting noticed and whatever. And this is probably, there's obviously been quite a few in the media and also on YouTube, but one that's really been an exemplar of this is Jordan Peterson's rise to fame through basically, he, as he freely says, he just chucked an iPad in a corner one day and pressed record, and then he found people started watching it, and then he said, I better do this properly, and then one thing leads to another, and then he ends up doing speaking tours around the world to express his ideas. And I find that kind of thing fascinating in a world where someone like him, and we'll talk about some of the others that we were talking about before too, but someone like him can't just express what he's saying in a tweet. or a Facebook
No.
post. You have to sit there for half an hour and listen to what he's saying to get the full understanding of what he's saying. And to be honest, sometimes when you listen to him, he gets a bit too jargony and technical on things. But when he does make his points, he doesn't do too badly, even if I don't agree with him half the time. But
only half the time.
Only half the time. But I find that fascinating that you get. Is that going to be a trend going forward, that you get these guys that who are just maybe historically have only ever been in the one forum, and maybe we've only ever had the one audience, that now they can just do that and it becomes something for them?
Yeah, look, I think you're precisely right. Traditionally you would find them in an academic forum. Potentially in the olden days, if they were really good enough, they probably could publish a book or two and they'd be read by similar intellectuals. I think the thing that's really different today is that it's the self-publishing and the link to self-marketing through social media, which makes this possible. If you go back even 20 years, you can't ever imagine television as it was in the old days, investing in a program like any of these guys do, even though talk became a lot more popular over the last 20 years. But not the singular presentation of ideas and the intellectual discourse around them. And I think now there's a market for that. There probably always has been a market for that. But look, it's so easy. And you can talk about a different one every week. We do.
Yep.
And, you can get a following, and that following can like your ideas. They can challenge your ideas. They can, join in arguments with you. They can take a point of view. And the one thing that I do think that is really driving people and the public's interest in this is the phenomena that we know quite well, which is the echo chamber. So you're likely to, click on things in social media and follow things in social media that you agree with.
Yeah. And
then also the fact that I think social media has really polarised debate. So if there's a cause, there's always the anti-cause. And I think that that provides a fertile ground for these people to attract more followers because they can hear through the anti-cause, they can be attracted to, the whole ecosystem.
So just to expand on that a little bit, in terms of the fact that it seems to me that the nature of the audience is different for these types of intellectuals, and that then they start to leverage that sort of thing into debates with each other. And an example for me that I've seen is because in researching Jordan Peterson's videos, I found that he was quite critical of Sam Harris, who's also someone who goes around doing something similar, but obviously has some different ideas about things. People like Richard Dawkins and probably Lawrence Krauss have been around longer, and they've been in different forums and have different histories and whatnot, so they're a little bit different. But what I find that's the common thing that's common to all of them is this real intense sort of push to argue that they're correct. Fine, that's all good, but it just kind of makes me, and it's not that I'm discounting what they're arguing for, but and maybe they do leave themselves open to something new that they hadn't considered, and I'm sure they do. But it just seems like the that sort of conflict that generates between the ideas of two intellectuals that are not on the same page seems a little disingenuous at times. Where what are they really doing? What is it that they're up to? Is it because of the advancement of an argument to get to the truth of something, or is it because they're stoking the followers that they're getting because they're seeing that, unlike having a bunch of university students listen to them, they've now got millions and millions of people who are completely random from all over the place that are listening to them on YouTube or wherever else?
Well, of course, because even well, every talkback radio show host will tell you that the easiest way to galvanise your audience is to create a villain. And then they're always tuning in, because if you have a go at the villain, that's a victory for the righteous. So I'm interested though, Ben, can you give us one example of when you were listening, first started listening to Sam or Jordan and what got you hooked, and then, like how you felt about some of the conflict?
Well, I guess two aspects to it. What caught YouTube's great. What they do is that you watch videos and then they'll start suggesting things. So one day a Jordan Peterson video popped up in the feed, and some of the things that caught my interest with him is that he's advocating for. I guess he's got a very anti-PC point of view, that he feels that the PC environment is destroying the fabric of society in effect, because it's pushing people into tribes. Because
it's polarizing, and that's the result.
Yeah, so that kind of caught my attention, and there was a lot of things that he was saying that were quite interesting about that. But then he kind of extends it further by saying that the reason why certain people and certain genders have specific roles in society is because of there's a reason why it's traditionally worked the way it has. So you can go watch his videos if you weren't able to read between the lines of what I just said there. But it's made him a favourite of right-wing commentators and whatnot, because it's disingenuous to say that he's a right-winger, because he really isn't, because he's talking in a lot more detail and in a lot more of a grey area than what something like that suggests. But the right wingers sort of latch onto it and say, "Oh yeah, we've got one of these guys on our side," that sort of thing. But that kind of made it interesting. And like he's got a book that this is what sort of made me keep watching some of what he put out there. He's got like a book where he's got 12 steps for how to run your life, and it is basic things like, when you get up in the morning, you make up your room and make sure that it's neat and tidy, because if you can't do that, how are you going to manage anything else?
Well, that's right. What if mum's busy that morning?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So anyway, so that's kind of the context. And so the main thing that I got from him was that he's really disparaging of PC culture, and that it started in universities. He's really concerned about what's happening in universities and with PC culture at the moment, and that it's leaking out into the broader culture as a result. Another aspect of this, and this is where the conflict with Sam Harris comes into it, is that I wouldn't say he's an advocate for religion per se, but he thinks that there's a reason why it holds value for people in terms of finding a certain level of meaning or whatever in their lives or whatever. Whereas Sam Harris clearly doesn't. He takes a very different point of view of, again, do you call it an atheist point of view? But it's more like he's advocating for complete and utter secular rationalism, I guess, would be the only way to describe it. So the two of them obviously come into conflict on that. But just in the way I've just described it then, that's not a straight, I'm a religious guy and I'm an atheist going at it. That's actually, it's very granular what's going on in the two arguments there, because what they're talking about has many layers to it. And what I find fascinating with all of that is you watch all of that, and my thing about this, and this is where we came back before about them always arguing that they're correct. You see that they'll either go at each other directly, or maybe they'll go at each other in their own individual videos, and it just makes me think, well, maybe both of you have a point. Are you willing to accept that or not? That was the thing that kind of stood out to me, because there was you don't ever agree with 100% of everything anyone says, because you're your own individual, you've got your own opinions and whatever else. But if you try to keep it rational and try to keep yourself open-minded and listen, and it's on that last point, listening, that I wonder whether these guys actually do any of that as part of the discourse.
Well, it's a good point. I'm sure they listen to their other people that are, well, I wouldn't use the word competitors, but I guess that are out there in the ecosystem. Because let's face it, there's nothing better than sitting down and nodding while you agree with somebody giving you an intellectual discourse. But as I said before, like if there's a villain that you can include as well, and we can, stick one up the villain as well, then that, that makes for a really good little podcast.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess that fundamentally what my question on that, though, is for these guys to go out and advocate as to be the truth tellers. I guess that's, I don't know if they see themselves that way, but that's kind of how they come across. How can they sit there with a straight face and not acknowledge other people's points of view?
Well, I agree with you, but I think there's the other thing that's different slightly is they're almost evangelical. So even the skeptics, like Dawkins and Krauss, they're strident atheists, but by the same token, they're almost, and I know they would disagree with this, but I think they're almost promoting atheism with, an evangelical fervour.
Yeah.
Science is right. There was nothing before the universe began, and that's just the way it is. And we should, just be amazed at how beautiful the world is because there is no God, and it's just kind of like an anti, they've almost seized the anti-cause.
And to play the devil's advocate on what they're arguing about, the thing like Lawrence Krauss is an excellent example. Like listening to him talk about things is quite fascinating. Because he knows his stuff and all that. But when it comes to that, but when it comes to that question of there was nothing. How did he put it? Something from nothing. That idea. It could be. But
great. But if you've ever noticed, when he's asked, well, there was nothing there, we can't explain it, so don't worry about it.
And that's my point. How can you categorically 100% say that there isn't another explanation to the one you're giving if there's no way to prove it? And that's the best part of it, because these guys always talk about evidence, and that's what they're working off. But it seems like they're trying to create come to a logical conclusion to what the evidence is suggesting. But there's still a gap there that they can't explain. And should they really be so forthright as to what that is? Because then if they're just saying a belief, how are they different to some religious person saying what they're saying?
Well, I don't know. Dawkins and Krauss both argue that, they don't believe, they just accept the science, and they, understand what the unknowns are, and et cetera, et cetera. But I do find it interesting because you look at those sorts of audiences, and one thing that probably, good old Trump and the more right-wing commentators have managed to achieve is, they've managed to whip up themselves a little audience that tends to perhaps be a little bit myopic in their outlook on life and tend to be a little bit fearsome and tend to love an enemy. They've got to have someone they love to hate. And I think, to a certain extent now, the polarisation is causing an anti-cause, which is where Jordan Peterson is talks about that left-wing sort of sanctimony is creeping out. That could be argued that is just as bad as the right-wing tribe. But I guess the thing that might be said about that was, well, maybe you can't expect any more from right-wingers, but you should be able to expect a little bit more compassion and understanding from the left, arguably. But it's that dynamic.
Yeah.
And the fact now that you can throw barbs over the fence in full view on a podcast, get 1 million listens, that really is stoking this and turning it into a new kind of quasi-intellectual diatribe.
Yeah, exactly. I guess just to sort of start to close this out, and this is more just to get an idea of what you think about this, is just another set of ideas that Peterson has around, and this is where, just to round out why the right loves him so much, is that he's quite critical of what he calls the radical left. not because he's a right winger, but because he thinks that the left hasn't been held as accountable as the right has been in terms of, you know, their worst excesses, if that makes sense. In other words, I think in one of his videos he said, you know, the right gave us the Nazis and we sorted that out, and they've been, you know, held accountable to that, but the left hasn't been held accountable for a similar sort of thing. And I think he was talking about Stalin or something like that, not being held as accountable. And he can send me a comment if I haven't got that right, but because he's pretty good with that sort of thing. But one of the things that stems out of that is that he has a very strong opinion around. He thinks that society should have and people should have every equal opportunity. Equality of opportunity. So in other words, everyone has the ability to, and the chance to have an opportunity, I guess, to advance themselves, be better, and whatever. He's really opposed to the idea of equality of outcome, which I guess is communism. Yeah. Because he says that in every statistic that he's ever seen, it doesn't matter what you do with our behaviour, everything trends towards the 1% at the end of the day. So, which I actually found that a really interesting set of ideas. Actually, that I think there could be argued that we should be trying to get fairness of opportunity for people, but how realistic is it if you just tell everyone, yep, everyone, you're getting $100,000 a year, no one gets above $100,000 a year, everyone doesn't get less than $100,000 a year? Does that sounds like it could be a recipe for disaster, because it saps all of that sort of human desire to try and achieve and, you know, push forward and do all that sort of stuff.
Well, look, me personally, I probably don't have a point of view either way on right or left generally, but I'm very glad though that these ideas and these sorts of videos and podcasts are out there now, if it lifts people's desire to challenge themselves intellectually and ask these questions and ask the what if. If it becomes dogma where you just believe whatever Jordan or Sam or Richard or tell you, then I think that's very dangerous. Yeah. But if it challenges people, then I think that this could be a room for a new sort of way of modern enlightenment. I mean, I'd prefer to see people, you know, starting to question more ethically our society, and not just from, I guess, the polarised positions that exist today, but as we talk often about, you know, what about the future? You know, what should our ethics be with robots? You know, what should we be doing about the future of money, about the future of work, and what is our philosophical position as individuals, all of us, on making the world a better place? Yeah. And if I would hope that they're the sorts of topics that are going to become more and more popular over the next decade. And if they do, then I think there's really a chance for an enlightened Star Trek style future for us all.
Oh, well, we absolutely.
And then no hope.
Oh, well, we have to end on that note so that we can feel more positive about where we're going. So another great chat, Steve. So thanks for that. And I guess check out those videos, because if you haven't already, because it's fascinating, and it actually provides some interesting entertainment, if nothing else, that you might not have expected from a source like that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube, Vimeo, RSS feeds, all of our channels there. Watch us, listen to us on your devices, and hope you enjoy the website. We greatly appreciate your visit there. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.